Today, we are going to be talking about the keystone component of our series on finding your purpose. And that keystone component is that you have to start with your why. You have to start with your why. You have to know and define your mission. Welcome to A More Beautiful Life Collective, the podcast where I help Christian women bridge the gap between the woman that they want to be and the life that they're currently living, with grace, simple rhythms, and a heart rooted in God. I'm your host, Casey Fletcher. Let's take the next step together. Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 4 of A More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fletcher, and today I'm so excited to talk a little bit more about our purpose and our calling. I think this is something that is definitely needed right now to hone in on our purpose and our calling, because I think we are all called to do big things for God. Right now, we have especially seen how if you can dedicate your life to God, you can make big waves in the world. But all too often, I think we allow ourselves to kind of just be blown and tossed by the wind, by culture, by jobs and responsibilities. And so if we live on mission, we can do great things, but all too often we don't even have a mission. We're just wandering aimlessly. And we know that if we wander aimlessly, we are going to drift. Today, we are going to be talking about the keystone component of our series on finding your purpose. And that keystone component is that you have to start with your why. You have to start with your why. You have to know and define your mission. My husband works in construction, and one of the givens in that field is that you need to have a big old white truck that is a little bit beat up, a little bit run down, that you can haul just basically anything with. There was that meme going around about somebody who had, a little bitty truck, and then you had the big old truck, and they were talking about the differences in them, but they were kind of being, you don't need a truck like that. But if you've worked in construction, that truck has definitely came in handy. And I do think that people don't realize why you need those. But anyway, so he has that big truck. It's necessary for him to drive, his trailers, haul tools, get materials. But one of the unseen parts of having that big old white truck is that if it's a little bit wet outside, a little bit rainy, it's going to get stuck in the mud somewhere. And many of you, if you have a truck, if your husband has a truck, you probably have experienced this before, where it's like, you got the car stuck again, if they are off-roading anywhere, or even, in an unpaved part of your yard. And so one time, he was renovating the house that we lived at before we lived in this house that we currently live in. And, he tried to go out and tame the jungle of the backyard. And so he loaded up his truck and he had all of the tools and he headed out back. But then, the recent rains kind of made the ground a little bit squishy, and he didn't realize. So he drove over that soft part in the ground, and he was like, oh no, I'm kind of getting stuck. And so then he did the thing that you should not do whenever you start to get stuck. He revved up his tires, and then his tires just drove further and further down into the mud. And the harder he drove, the lower he sank down. So long story short, he got his truck stuck in the backyard for a whole week. It was back there. And so he had to use my car for a whole week. And no, this was not the last time that he's gotten his truck stuck in the mud. I know some of you probably have stories like that you could tell of the same thing happening. Recently, I was thinking about the work that I do on the blog and everything that goes with it. And I began to feel a little bit like that truck spinning its tires into the mud, but going nowhere. I was trying to do all the things. I was trying to show up on my social media every day, post content, start Facebook groups, redo my website, have a growing email list. But the harder that I spun, the lower I sank in the mud, and I was going nowhere. Maybe you can relate. You're busy spinning your tires. You're hustling. You're working all the time. But the spinning really just isn't getting you anywhere. You're stuck. In moments like these, often we don't need to do more. Recently, we've had a string of rainy days around here as we head into hurricane season. That's just part of the fall. And so the front of where my husband's shop is on the property that we live in now has started to become a muddy mess. And on one of those days, he went out there, he loaded up his truck, he was getting ready to go, and he started to pull off with his truck and his trailer. And I saw those wheels start to spin in the mud. And I was like, no, go the other way. And so the thing that got him out of that, where he didn't get his truck stuck for another week, is he started to change direction, and he got into a place where he could move, where he could gain more traction with his tires. So sometimes I feel like we're stuck spinning. We also need to get a clear direction. We need to develop a clear compass. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. What if you could filter every decision that you made through a simple God-given mission statement that reflects your true calling? This filter becomes your compass. It becomes your guide, and it keeps you from getting stuck. It helps you to do the work that you actually want to do. It helps you to walk more boldly in your calling. We talked about the importance of walking boldly into our calling, which requires us to develop a vision and refine the values that we want our life to have. Our unique calling isn't some mystical thing that we need to look in a magic 8-ball to find out. It's based on our gifts, our burdens, and our seasons. What are we gifted at? What are some of the people that we care about, that we want to reach? Who is our audience? And then what season of life are we in? Obviously right now, I'm in the season with young kids. And so there are certain things that I just cannot accomplish, but there are some things that I can accomplish. And aside from the fact that occasionally on the podcast, I might have a little visitor, I can do this right now, but there's some things I cannot do with 3 kids in tow. When we live in alignment with this, we can live with intention and not exhaustion, because we're not going to feel like, why can I not do this thing that I really want to do? We're honoring our season. So when we talk about walking forward in our unique calling, we're talking about work that works with our gifts, burdens, and seasons. But I think so many of us, we revert back to our old habits, our old ways of thinking when the going gets tough. When we're sleep deprived, the kids are wild, the house is a mess, the dog is barking. Do we really show our best selves? Often in those moments, we need a foundation to fall back on to make sure that we continue living in alignment with our values. To honor our unique calling, we need a mission that we can filter the things that we do through. Without a clear mission, we often drift into overcommitment, burnout, or comparison. People, they come up to us with needs, and we feel obligated to say yes, even if it doesn't match our calling. And that can be really easy if we're living in a season where we have so much going on that we're just like, I'll do it myself. Or if somebody comes up to us, we feel guilty, and then we say, yes, I can do this. And so we overextend ourselves, and then we're left not doing the work that we're uniquely gifted for, the work that we feel called to do, the work that we really know that we need to do that speaks to our burdens and our seasons. Instead, we're blown and tossed by the whims of others. Overextension, it also leads to burnout. When we're moving 1,000,000 miles a minute, we can never pause to think, okay, is this pace sustainable? And pretty soon, we're worn out and run down, and we crash. We focus so much on being everything to everyone that we neglect the good work that we are supposed to do. And in this time, we never stop and think, okay, is this pace sustainable? And pretty soon, we're worn out, we're run down, and we crash. And we focus so much on being everything to everyone that we neglect the good work that we're supposed to do. And other times, we're overextended, but it's not because somebody's asking us to do something, but it's because we're caught in a comparison trap. We see a new shiny thing, whether that's an ideal self, who we want to be, or a trend or an actual object, and we think, okay, if we had that thing, we would feel happy. And we see that other successful people have done that thing, and so we'll feel happy. And so we try to squash the work that we want to do into the mold that somebody else has created. And because of that, again, we still don't live at our unique calling because we're trying to step into somebody else's. I think this is something that I see often as you look, at influencers and things like that. You see what's worked for them and you want the life that they have. But again, we don't know all of the things that go on into their life. We also don't know, the people behind the scenes. If you want, the house that somebody else has that you see on a video, you don't know, maybe they have a cleaner coming in, every week before they do their videos. And so you just don't know what they have to make their life happen, to make their life sustainable. And so you want what they have, but you don't know what they have. And so you run yourself ragged. And again, you can fall into this trap where you do all this stuff and you miss out on the things that God is actually calling you to do. You miss out on that work that He is wanting you to do. I've done this myself. Social media and ministry work, it can become very noisy. You're producing content, you want to help people, but you often lose the thread of what God has actually asked you to do. And so we try to hustle harder to grow our following or grow our ministry, to make things bigger, because we want traction. We want what we're doing to work. And if you've ever worked in a business, if you've ever done something where you're trying to build something out of nothing, you know what I'm talking about. Whenever you're trying to spin your wheels to get things going. And so you try a million things. You try to just, throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. But often if you do that, you end up overextended. You end up feeling like there's just all of these things. You have so many irons in the fire, but nothing is actually happening. Nothing is getting done. We think if we can only post one more reel, do one more story, have one more product, then okay, after that, I'll finally have arrived. Maybe pay one more bill, get one more degree, maybe even, have this job, have this thing, have this house, have this item in my house. But in our heart of hearts, we know that the fruit of our ministry and the work that we're doing is never tied to our follower count. It's never tied to the metrics of big, what we have in our house, the salary that we have, the price tag on an item sitting in our driveway. This is the danger of influencer culture. When we influence without intentionality, we can grow, gathering followers, without bearing lasting fruit in our lives. People like us when we entertain them. But the second that we require something of them, they leave us behind. And honestly, we're in good company. If this is happening to us, we should learn to embrace that, because that happened to Jesus too. He had all of these followers and then he required something of them. And they said, this is too much. This guy's talking a little bit weird. And they left. And that's the thing. And I feel like that now, I'm seeing that on social media where people have, stuck their stake in the ground. They said, okay, this is what I believe. And people are leaving them. But the thing is, you don't want those people anyway, because you don't want people that are making you chase fruit that does not last. As we think about all this, we live in the midst of influencer culture, but what truly is influence? Is influence something that we should aspire to have? Influence at its most basic level, I think, is just the ability to shape people's thoughts, habits, and faith journey, whether that's online or in our local community. At first, this may be something that you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I like this idea of having influence over other people, to shape their thoughts and habits, to shape people's faith journey. But honestly, I feel like we've all been called to do that, right? If you look at the Great Commission, what we're called to do is to go and make disciples. Well, that's influencing their thoughts, their habits, and their faith journey. So anytime that you think about discipleship is the practice of shaping lives of other people. We have influence over other people. Everybody has influence over other people. But our goal, whenever we have influence, is not to make ourselves greater. Our goal is to make God greater. He must increase, I must decrease. And so when we have influence with the goal of discipleship, we can grow God's kingdom with wisdom and care. Our influence is tied to the works of our ministry. The word ministry comes from the word servant, and our ministry is living out the gospel in spaces that God has entrusted to us. We can work to bring God's kingdom to earth in those spaces. When we look at our influence and our ministry, we can see how influence can become ministry when it's aligned with our calling. When we enter into that space where we have our gifts, burden, and our seasons, and we are entering into this work that we're doing in that space, we have influence over the people that we're working with in that space, and that just becomes our ministry. That is the work that we're doing. So this could be something that is in a church. I teach our primary school class. I just started that a couple weeks ago. That is a ministry that is in the church, and everybody would call that a ministry, right? But there's some things that you do that people don't call it ministry, but it is ministry because it's your gift, your burden, and your season. It's aligned with your calling. You try to have influence over people, to grow them, to make disciples. That's a ministry. And so that could be something like if you're a teacher, that is a ministry. It could be something that could be a social media channel that you have. That is a ministry. It could be something that, I've seen people do this with their construction companies or with the work that they're doing, totally unrelated, what it looks like unrelated to the church and the church building. But it definitely is something that grows God's kingdom. One example of this can be found in parenting. Parenting is a calling. It honors our gifts. Our children are our gifts. It honors our burdens because I think every parent who is a Christian longs to see their child grow up strong in the Lord. It honors our season. So the season of having a full nest. When we're parents, we have influence over our children to shape their lives. And this is all lived out in the ministry of our homes as we serve our children in an attempt to live out the gospel to the glory of God, to build God's kingdom here through our children. An example from my life is podcasting. I enjoy this. I feel like I enjoy writing and teaching. I have a burden for helping people create these beautiful, intentional lives that honor their current realities to try to make that into something beautiful. So in the season, my influence, it doesn't include lots of crowds and classes, but it does include this little space of the internet that I can pour into during nap time. I get to live out my calling through the ministry of creating this. The intersection of influence and ministry can be found in so many areas of life: hospitality, creative work, church ministry, and others. And so what can help us to align all of these things, to get clear on what we want our lives to look like so that we can bear good fruit for God's kingdom? Well, it's clarifying our mission. Whenever I was in high school, I went on a mission trip. And one of my mentors then, he gave me a book that he believed was foundational for ministry. And it was called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. In this book, it encourages readers to begin not with products or processes or even outcomes of what they want their business to look like. The beginning is always the why behind what you are doing. When you develop your why, you have the reason that then becomes the filter for your actions. So your why is your values applied to your ministry. It becomes your guide. You need to find your why. And so here are 3 guiding questions to help you find your why. 1, what has God uniquely given me? So again, this would be gifts, personality, resources. You should know that if you've already clarified your calling, you should know what you've been gifted. And then who are you called to serve right now? So this would be your burdens. And then what fruit do you want to see in their lives? So what is the outcome of the work that you do in their lives? Our mission is tied to our calling. Our calling gives us that direction. So we consider our gifts, burdens, and seasons, and consider the work that would honor those 3 things. But our mission is our calling in action. As we consider the things I just talked about, we figure out how we can steward those things to grow God's kingdom. And then we turn to our burden. Who are we trying to reach? Who are we called to serve? And then finally we think, okay, how do I want these people to grow? The Christian life, it is one of multiplication. We aren't called to take our talents and bury them in the sand. We're called to use those talents and grow them tenfold. A good seed bears 100, 60, 40 times what was sown. My why has been born out of my current life. I look at my life and I don't want it to be lived in vain. I don't want to look at the end of the time, however much time I have, and say, okay, I accomplished nothing with my life. There's nothing to show for it. I want it to be truly beautiful, a life that's lived for the glory of God, to the good of his kingdom. But I know how easy it is to dream up ideals that crumble in the face of the stresses we experience. I've had too many New Year's resolutions that I have made and abandoned, where I know how easy it is for me to just give up on those things. So I use what I know and my ability to write, to teach, to create, and the time in the margins of my days to create this space that encourages all of us to reach for beautiful, lovely life in the midst of the messes. So I hope that you'll take what you hear and what we talk about here and multiply it in your life as you influence your children, your spouse, and your community. We press on towards the hope that we have. If you want to learn more about your calling, you can get the Build a More Beautiful Life workbook on the AMBL shop. It's a 5-day workbook where you're going to consider your calling and align it to your life to live it out more beautifully. In Profit First, this is a business book by Mike Michalowicz. He tells the story of a man called Eddie who didn't have a clear mission guiding his work. His primary career was to rake leaves, but once he visited a house, he would continue to offer other services because what could hurt? It's a bigger paycheck, right? But with the job comes a price tag that's associated with completing that job. You need the equipment and supplies, not to mention the time that it takes to figure things out by Googling YouTube videos and things like that. So at the conclusion of Eddie's day, sure, his $50 raking job had morphed into $2,000 of gutter cleaning, roof repair, and chimney restoration. But the amount he had to spend on supplies had ballooned to $2,500. We need to stay focused on our mission because truly we're going to become more profitable that way. Our profit will probably not be measured by the number in our bank accounts, but it will be measured by our fruitfulness. I shared before where I felt the intersection of my influence and ministry is. And even though I recognize this intersection, I have felt the pull of trying to spin my wheels doing meaningless growth. Once every few months, I find myself asking, what should I do? Should I start a roadside bakery, a homestead, begin an embroidery business? Maybe I could teach myself how to sew, and then I could start doing an altering business in my spare time, right? None of these things are bad, and people do make money doing these things as stay-at-home moms. But, in the season with the calling that I have, I shouldn't be distracted by them. My time is too precious to allow myself to be turned to the right or the left, chasing shiny things. I need to keep my eye on my mission. It allows me to say yes to what is the right thing right now. There are a million ways that we can be distracted by social media and other opportunities that can get in the way of living our mission. That's why I always try to pass everything I do through a mission filter. And what does that look like? Extracurricular activities are great, but it may not be the season of life for that this year. Yeah, trips can become fond memories with your kids, but maybe we have to turn our focus away from that right now. Maybe a work opportunity would lead to fast growth, but choosing that would mean saying no to my family, which is something that I'm not willing to do right now. We should say yes to what aligns with our why and say no to what doesn't. Ultimately, we're all called and commanded to go and make disciples. The way that we live that out will change depending on what our unique calling is. If we use our mission as a guide, we can live fruitful lives for God. So what's your mission? I want you to take some time this week to write out a simple mission statement. Then you should share it with a friend, a mentor, or a spouse for feedback. If you want to take it a step further, before saying yes to the next opportunity, run it through your mission filter. I would love to hear what your mission is, and you can always comment on this video, or you can send me an email at kcfletcher@amorebeautiful.collective.com because I would love to hear what your mission is and how you are clarifying that in this season. You can walk through building a mission statement aligned with your calling in the Build a More Beautiful Life workbook, 5 days to align your work, calling, and family. Remember, you don't need to be pulled in a million different directions. Do the faithful work that God has entrusted to you in this moment. Thanks so much for listening this week. I know that I had a chatty daughter running around in the background, but I think this is so important for everyone to know. Your purpose matters, your calling matters, your work matters. And so I hope that you live that out on purpose. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. You can also leave a rating and review to help others find the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at A More Beautiful Life Collective. And you can also join our Facebook group where we're walking through 30 days to a life you love. Until next time, keep creating a life you love and cultivating your heart for God. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me this week on the More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. If you love what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. You can also visit my blog at amorebeautifullifecollective.com for more resources, printables, and guides to help you cultivate faith, purpose, and joy every day. Until next time, keep creating a life you love and cultivate your heart for God.